Can you guys hear me? And can you guys see the screen? Hello? Can you guys hear me? And can you guys see the screen? Okay. So we'll get started. Today is the 11th live session. We'll be discussing lectures 31 to 33. These are like the last few lectures. After this, 34 to 36 is basically revision, and we'll have one more session at the end. We'll talk more about that after today's class. Yeah. So here are some important links. There's the layout. So today we'll be discussing applied ecology, which consists mostly of the optimum yield problem, where we try to determine what is the optimum amount of resources that we can use while also doing it sustainably so that we don't affect the environment. The second thing is about biological control, where we talk about pest control and practices that can best help us get rid of pests, mostly for agriculture. Uh, and the third one is ecotoxicology and pollution management, where we also talk a bit about restoration ecology. So we'll start with week 11, applied ecology. So the first lecture was an optimum yield problem. Does anyone have any questions from previous lectures or any doubts? Okay. So uh, before we move on to the graph, the thing is basically, let's say if you have a pond where you have a lot of fishes, and what you're doing is basically you are harvesting these fish, you're catching these fish for food or for other purposes. So let's say every month or every year, these fishermen go and they catch, let's say, 1,000 fish, right? So what happens eventually? So depending on how much of the population of the fish you catch, what will happen is sometimes if you are not, uh, so let's say for an example, let's say this uh, pond, let's say has 1,000 fish in total. So by next year, they can reproduce to produce, let's say, 1,300 fishes, right? So this is first year and this is second year. So without any disturbance, if you let these 1,000 fishes be there, they'll produce 1,300 fishes. So let's say on the second year, we start fishing and we take out, let's say, 300 fishes out of this. So what we are left with at the end of the second year is again 1,000 fishes. So in the third year, what will happen is these 1,000 fishes will again give rise to 1,300 fishes. And again, on the third year, we can take out 300 fishes out of the pond and so on. So this is something that we can keep on doing sustainably without affecting the population of the fish uh, at all or like drastically. But let's say there's another situation where again you have 1,000 fish and at the end of the first year, let's say there are 1,300 fish and let's say you take out 800 fish. So you're left with, let's say, 500 fishes, right? Now these 500 fishes at the end of, so this is at the end of, these are the starting of second year. Let's say this is at the end of second year. So this is at the starting of third year. You're left with 500 fishes. So these 500 fishes will reproduce to produce, let's say, they can't produce 1,300 fishes anymore because they are less in number. So what they will do is they'll, let's say, produce 150 fishes, right? So in total, we'll have 650 fishes. Then let's say the next year again you try to catch fishes, and since they're not a lot of fishes, they're not 800 fishes, you can't catch 800 fishes this year. So what you do is you end up catching, let's say, 400 fishes. How many fishes are left? Here's 250 fishes. Now these 250 fishes will again give rise to a smaller amount of fishes. So let's say at the end of this year, you have around 350 fishes, right? So the next time you catch, your catch will keep decreasing. So first year you caught 800, second year you caught 400. The next year maybe you'll catch 200, and it will start decreasing. And eventually what will happen is you'll have not you'll not have enough fishes in this pond that they can reproduce and like basically reestablish the population of fishes that you're catching. So eventually you'll run out of fishes on this pond, right? So this is what happens if you use resources unsustainably. So this is unsustainable and this is sustainable. This is sustainable because you are giving enough, you are leaving out enough individuals every year so that they can reproduce to produce more fishes. This is unsustainable because you are taking out more individuals from the pond than it is needed to re-establish the population or let the population keep moving at the same rate. So here in the graph, what we see is the these different megafauna that are present in the North Pacific Ocean. So basically, the great whale have different kinds of seals, sea lions, and otters, and how basically due to overuse or over what do you say exploitation or basically unsustainable harvest of these, we are basically seeing a collapse in their population. So here we see that the uh, great whale, sorry, yeah. So the great whale, so this is basically the population or the amount that we are catching, right? So basically, initially it increases as a technology to catch whales and all keeps increasing. We keep catching more and more whales. But after a point, we start seeing a decline because there are not enough whales that can basically reproduce to maintain that population. So we are catching less and less whales. So after we see a decline in this population or in this population of great whales, what will happen is eventually it will get so let's say in this case, initially you caught 800 fishes, you sold them, you had a very high profit. The second year you caught 400 fishes. You didn't get a huge profit, but it was manageable for you. So let's say you continue fishing. But the next year when you catch 200 fishes, it's very difficult for you to get a high amount of profit because your expenses to catch fishes also keeps on increasing because it gets more and more difficult to catch fishes. Right. So here we see that eventually like the catch keeps on decreasing, and after a point, it becomes economically non-sustainable. So you can't basically catch whales and sell them for a profit. So what do? You turn to other uh, animals. So next, you start catching seals. Then you start after we see a decline in the seal population, you start catching uh, sea lions and sea otters and so on. So this has led to a sequential collapse of many different megafauna that are found in the North Pacific Ocean. Similarly, we can see for other animals such as the blue whale, which is caught for food or for other medicinal purposes. So basically, initially there's a rise in the catch. So this line that we see here, which is somewhere around, let's say 7,000 or something, is the maximum yield that is sustainable. So in the case of our fishes, the maximum sustainable yield that we had here was 300, because even if you take out uh, maximum sustainable yield is 300, because even if you take out 300 fishes every year, these 1,000 fishes can repopulate the population so that you get 300 more fishes for next year, right? So what this means is if year after year we take out, let's say 7,000 whales, which is this number, let's say 7,000 whales, then we can keep on doing that till a very long time without affecting the whale population. But what we see is due to our overexploitation, due to our overuse, what we see is people are catching, let's say, 30,000 whales or 20,000 whales in some years. So what happens is this leads to a decline in the population of whales and subsequently a decline in the number of whales that we catch. So this gap here basically is due to the World War where there was not a lot of whaling, but we see that the general pattern is that it keeps on decreasing after a point and eventually the population collapses and we no longer find any whales, right? It becomes economically unsustainable for us to catch and sell these whales. We see the same for different kinds of whales in the southern hemisphere, where basically initially we catch a large number of these whales, but the population collapses and then we again move into another kind of whale because, so for example, let's say the blue whale we were catching early in the 1930s very frequently, but after some time its population crashed and then people started moving on to this second kind of whale, which is fin whales. Then after that, population started crashing. They started moving into different kinds of whales. So basically, this has led to a sequential collapse of many different species of animals, and this is an unsustainable practice. So we need to figure out for a given species or for a given resource or for a given animal, what is the optimum yield or what is the optimum number of individuals or optimum amount of biomass that we can basically extract without affecting the population very negatively. So for that, we need to go back to our equation, which we had of estimating the population size. So here in the equation, what it tells us is basically you have a population, which is Pn, which is at time n. So different kinds of forces act on it. So one thing is the natality, which is the birth. So births will keep on increasing the population. Similarly, the other thing that keeps on increasing the population is immigration. And two factors that keep decreasing the population or affect the population negatively, population size, are immigration, where individuals move out from the population, and mortality, which is basically death. So Pn plus 1, which is the population size at time n plus 1, is given by Pn, which is population size at time n, plus the natality, plus immigration, because these factors are adding to the population, minus mortality, minus immigration, because these factors are taking away individuals from the population, right? So for calculating the optimum yield, we can use a similar equation. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Okay, and do these points in the graphs represent the counting attempts? Which points exactly are we talking about? Uh, so these points are basically the, what do you say, number of whales or number of organisms that are caught every year for fishing or whaling. So here I think the y-axis is basically this is the maximum catch that you can have. And this is how the catch keeps on. So this year we got the highest catch and then it keeps on decreasing. Here it's the number of whales that were caught in each attempt. And here again, it's the number of whales that are caught in each attempt. Is that clear? Okay. Yeah. So to calculate the optimum yield, we'll look at a slightly different equation. We can look at a slightly different equation also, where basically instead of looking at the number, so here we are looking at the population size or the number of individuals. Here, what we are interested in looking at is the weight of the stock, or basically weight of the population, biomass of the population. So let's say S2 is the weight of the stock at the end of the year. So this will be the biomass of all the individuals that are present at, let's say, December 2024, right? S1 is the weight of all the animals that are present in the beginning of the year, which is January 2024. Then we have these four things. Again, like we had these four things. We have R, which is basically, they're slightly different, but yeah. So R, which is basically the weight of the new recruits, or basically the increase in weight that is coming due to birth of new animals. Okay. We have G, which is the growth of the weight of the fish life. So basically, every year from January to December, the fishes or the whales and all other organisms will basically feed and basically increase in size. So G is basically the growth that is due to the increase in the weight of the fish that are alive in the population. M is the weight of the fish that is removed through mortality or because of death of these fishes or whales. So that is subtracted from the value. And F is basically the yield to fishery. That is the amount of what do you say? Amount of biomass that is taken out of the system because of fisheries. So if we want to find a sustainable point, or if you want to, for example, here for this blue whale, we know we somehow calculated, people somehow calculated that this is the maximum sustainable yield. So if you want to calculate the maximum sustainable yield, what we need to do is we need to ensure that S2 will be equal to S1. So the weight of the stock at the end of the year should be equal to the weight of the stock at the beginning of the year. So we are not affecting the population or affecting the biomass of the population, right? Now, if we input this, if we put this particular condition into this equation, what will happen is these two will cancel out. So what we are left with is R plus G minus M minus is equal to 0. So R plus G is equal to M plus F. So the weight that is added due to new recruits and the weight that is added due to growth of these individuals should be equal to the weight that is removed due to mortality or individual deaths and the weight that is removed due to fisheries. Right. So basically, if you want to understand how much biomass we can actually catch without affecting the population, then F will be given as R plus G minus M. And if you know these factors, or if you can estimate these factors somehow, you can determine the optimum yield or how much of the weight of the population or biomass of the population we can take out from the system without affecting the population. Right. So one way we can do this is using the logistic population growth equation. So if you recall, basically we talked about this before. So this is how a population grows. So initially there's a few individuals, then there's a lag phase where it slowly grows. Then there's a log phase where there's some accelerated growth of the population. And then eventually there's a stable phase where the population is stable after a point. Okay. So here, so the equation is basically given here, the logistic population growth equation. We are asked if the carrying capacity is 40. So this part will come somewhere around 40 because the stable phase of the population should be around the carrying capacity. The intrinsic growth rate is basically this R here, which is 0.2, and the initial population, which is N here, will N naught will be equal to 1. So how many animals can we harvest sustainably is the question. So if you want to maximize our yield, what we should be doing is basically we should be catching animals during this log phase of growth. because as we see here before, this F depends on the total growth of the population, which is the addition of biomass due to new recruits, and also addition of biomass due to growth of the fishes that are alive, minus the mortality. If you assume that the mortality is similar across all this time, then this is the point where we'll have the maximum growth of the population, right? Which is the log phase. So we should ideally be catching our fishes here for maximum or for the maximum yield. Right. So what we can do is basically if we plot this equation, giving using the values that we have here, we see that basically this is the equation for this is the curve for our population, which is given by the blue line. So it slowly increases. We have a lag phase here. Then we have a log phase, which is from here to here, with the population is dramatically increasing, and then it begins to taper off, and we have a slower growth. If we plot the differential of this, which basically gives us the rate of growth per year, which is given by these bars, we see that the highest growth of the population occurs somewhere around here. So this is the time where we should be basically extracting individuals or fishing here from this population. Okay. So based on this, we can calculate basically yeah. So let's say we decide on this window, then basically from here to here or something. So the number of individuals that we can harvest sustainably will be somewhere close to the difference of this and this. So let's say this is 25 and this is 19. So we can, let's say, harvest 5 or 6 individuals, and then the population drops back to 19. But then the next few years, it will again increase to 25. Right. So we'll get the maximum benefit if we are basically harvesting the population here, and the number will depend on the specific time points we choose and basically the difference between these. Okay. But the thing is with populations, it does not. So this is the ideal case, right? Where the population is increasing continuously and there are no other environmental fluctuations or stressors that are affecting the population. But in real life, there are a lot of other environmental fluctuations that can give rise to a decrease in population or give rise to basically a, what do you say, population crash on due to other reasons other than fishing or other than catching fishes or harvesting these animals, right? So here as an example, we see these fishes, which are called anchovies. So this is the harvest of anchovies in Peru. So yearly harvest in Peru. Here we see that for this time period, there's not a lot of catch. And that is not because we are basically overexploiting the population, but this is also in part due to some other things. So uh, basically, due to this factor, due to this thing called the El Nino effect, right, which is basically leading to a population crash here, which is natural. So this is basically an environmental fluctuation that is leading to a decrease in the population of these anchovies. So these are basically fishes that are used for food, right? So we'll take a look at what El Nino is. So El Nino is basically an irregularly occurring and complex series of climatic changes affecting the equatorial Pacific region and beyond every few years, characterized by the appearance of unusually warm, nutrient-poor water off of northern Peru and Ecuador, typically in late December. The effects include reversal of wind patterns across the Pacific, drought in Australasia, and unseasonably heavy rain in South America. So basically what happens near Peru is that we have in the ocean, let's say. So we have these planktons that are there. So when these are basically photosynthetic creatures that produce their own food. So when they die, basically these bodies, they float down to the ocean floor. And then these fishes, the larvae of these fishes feed on these here. And sorry, uh, my mistake. Yeah. So basically, yeah, it goes down. And what happens is that due to winds that are flowing in this direction, the water that is present here is on the top surface is removed. So it goes this way. And therefore, the water that is present in the bottom layers of this ocean then comes up. Along with it comes up these basically uh, remains of these phytoplanktons, which are nutrient rich. They come up to the surface. And basically that uh, provides for a lot of nutrients that are present here, and the fishes and the larvae of the fishes can basically feed on that and grow, and basically the population of the fish can increase. However, during the El Nino, what happens is the direction of the wind changes. So the wind flows from this direction, and what happens is the warm water comes from the other side, and basically the water that is present here does not come and upwell near Peru, but it probably goes somewhere else. So in this region, which is near Peru, we don't get a lot of nutrients anymore because the direction of wind patterns has changed and the flow of basically the water has changed in the oceans. And because of that, basically you have nutrient poor water and warm water that is present here. And because of that, these fishes are not able to reproduce and basically grow. Right. So this is one environmental fluctuation which irregularly occurs and basically leads to a lot of changes in a lot of populations across the globe. And one of the things that we see is basically its impact on these populations of anchovies that are present near Peru. Right. So basically what happens here is we have low amount of nutrients, then we have a very low growth of planktons because of that. So here when the nutrients are coming up, they are not only providing food for basically the fish and all, but also food for the planktons. So there's a low growth of planktons in that area during El Nino, and because of that, there's a low availability of food for the fish larvae, and because of that, there's a drop in the fish population. People have estimated and seen that the amount of planktons that are present, the concentration of planktons that are present in the water does affect the growth of fish larvae. So if you have very low concentrations of plankton in a given what basically in water, you have very low survival of fish larvae. But if you keep on increasing the plankton concentration, you see that the fish larvae also keep on increasing. And yeah, basically, because these planktons act as food for the larvae for different fishes such as anchovies or haddock. So if the concentration of planktons is increasing, then the number of fishes that are reproducing, number of larvae that is surviving is also increasing. So this helps sustain the population. Right. Uh, People have also tried and shown that basically, uh, so basically these three lines represent three different concentrations of plankton in water. So here is 0.5, here the lowest one, the line that is below both these, then it's 1, and then it's 3, right? So this is basically increasing concentration. And we see that as the concentration of plankton increases, the mean dry weight of these fishes, which is basically the weight of these fishes, also increases. And also the length of these fishes increases as more planktons are available. Right. So as a food resource, if you have less food resource, it's affecting the population. If you have more food resource, it's beneficially affecting the population, you see an increase in the population size, and you also see an increase in the length of the individuals and the weight of the individuals. So there's this thing basically where you need to match the timing. So for example, let's say on the x-axis we have time, and here we have a number of different populations. So let's say this is our fish population, or basically the what do you say? Not juvenile population, right? So or fish larvae. So this is, let's say, the time around which the most of the fish are uh, basically reproducing, and so you have the highest number of larvae here. But you will also have some fishes that are basically reproducing slightly later, or some fishes that are reproducing slightly before. So because of that, you'll have this distribution. So you have basically, this is the number of fish larvae in the population. And this basically, let's say, the another graph we have, which is basically the number of phytoplanktons or number of planktons. So this is basically when there's, so this T1 is basically when we have the maximum of the fish larvae. T2 is basically when we have the maximum of the planktons. And we know that fish larvae require the planktons to basically survive and grow. So the larvae that are born somewhere here will not get enough food because there's not a lot of planktons that are around. So these will begin to die off. However, the larvae that are present in these patches will basically get some amount of food, and they will basically grow. So you'll see that this will be the population of the fishes that are coming up, right? So if there's a very high difference between T1 and T2, so if they are very far apart, then what will happen is we'll see a crash in the fish larval population because there are not enough planktons for the fish larvae to eat and survive. But if T1 is very close to T2, then we see that the population of fishes are basically growing because the fish larvae are getting enough food for them. Right. So this is basically given as the this is basically what we call the mismatch hypothesis. So basically here we have what do you say, the eggs of the fishes. So this, as I said, is a distribution like this, and so these eggs will hatch and give rise to these larvae. So if there's a match between the larvae and the larval food, which is the plankton, so here in this case we see a match where basically there's a high amount of overlap between the uh, amount of planktons that are present and the amount of larvae that are present. So in this region, we'll have a high amount of basically growth of these fishes, and the fish population will increase. Whereas if we have a mismatch where basically the larval food is coming up after a significantly long time of the larvae being produced, we'll see that there's only a small amount of overlap between these two, right, which is given by this. So the population of fish that we have, if there's a mismatch, will be lower than the population of fish that we have when there's a match between these two phenomena. Right. So basically, nature has its own ways of balancing all these things, but we as humans, due to climate change and other things, are beginning to affect these things. So another thing where we have this mismatch is when basically we see pollination. So the time of flowering and the time of uh, basically bees becoming available or going out for food is should be also matching. If there's a mismatch in that, then the bees will die off because of not enough food resource that is available for them because they're not getting enough nectar from the flowers, and the flowers trees will also not get pollinated, and because of that, they'll also begin to die off. Population of both the trees and both the bees or the pollinators will keep on decreasing. Okay. So next we have something, we discuss something called the tragedy of commons, which was basically a theory given by Garrett Harding in 1968 in one of his essays. So basically what he said is, I'll just read it out and then we'll talk about. So basically we are talking here about people who are herding. So let's say there's a field and we have, let's say, 5 or 6 herders who basically have, let's say, 1 cow each initially, right? So what Harding says is that as a rational being, each herdsman seeks to maximize his gain. Explicitly or implicitly, more or less consciously, he asks, what is the utility to me of adding one more animal to my herd? The utility has one negative and one positive component. So basically, the each individual herder is thinking to himself, uh, what will happen if I add one more cow to my herd, right? So the positive component is a function of the increment of one animal. Since the herdsman receives all the proceeds from the sale of the additional animal, the positive utility is nearly one. So basically, as a herdsman, what I'm thinking is if I get one more cow, whatever milk or whatever uh, resource I'll get out of it and I'll sell out of it, it will give me basically nearly one. So it will basically double my benefits, because if I had one cow, I could sell, let's say, 20 liters of milk every month. Now, if I have 2 cows, I can sell, let's say, 40 liters or close to 40 liters of milk. So it's basically adding uh, equally to my profit. So basically, the utility that I'm getting out of that animal or the benefit that I'm getting out of that animal is nearly plus one. Right. So 20 plus 20. 20 was the initial thing. I'm again getting 20. So the fraction that I'm increasing is plus one. The negative component is a function of the additional overgrazing created by one more animal. Since, however, the effect of overgrazing is shared by all the herdsmen, the negative utility for a particular decision-making herdsman is only a fraction of minus one. So what this basically means is that what I'm thinking now is that if I add one more cow, then it'll overgraze the field, right? Because the grassland where we are all herding our cows is basically the same. The size of the grassland is the same. So if I add one more animal, then that will need some more grass. So basically the amount of grass that is grazed by all these animals combined will be slightly more. But since this grass is a resource that is common to everyone, the negative effects of overgrazing will be shared by everyone. So whatever negative effect will be there, it won't be that negative for me, right? So it won't be minus one for me. It will be just a fraction of minus one for me and a fraction of minus one for everyone else, right? Adding together the component partial utilities, the rational herdsman concludes that the only sensible course for him to pursue is to add another animal to his herd. So basically, since I'm getting more benefit and I have to give less cost, because the cost is shared, but the benefit is not. The benefit is all mine, but the cost is shared between all the herdsmen. So the herdsman basically concludes that the only sensible course is to add another animal. So basically, I'll be in profit if I add one more cow to my herd, right? And another, and another, and another. Similarly, each time I'm thinking about adding an animal, this will be the thing that comes to my mind, that if I add one more animal, I'll get more benefits out of it, and the cost will be less because the cost is shared among everyone, but the benefit is just mine. Right. But this is a conclusion reached by each and every rational herdsman sharing a commons. So everyone, all 5 of my friends who are sharing the resource, who are basically herding their cows in the same grassland, will also think in the same way and will also try to increase their own personal benefit. And therein lies a tragedy. So what is the tragedy? Each man is locked into a system that compels him to increase his herds without a limit in a world that is limited. Ruin is the destination towards which all men rush, each pursuing his own best interest in a society that believes in the freedom of the commons. Freedom in commons brings ruin to all. So basically, what this means is everyone basically thinks in the same way that I was thinking. Everyone is like, if I add one more cow, I'll get more benefits out of it, and I won't have to share all of the cost. The cost will be shared by all six of us. So it won't affect me that much, but I'll get a lot of benefit out of it. So because of that, I'll add one more cow. My friend will add one more cow, and all of my friends will add one more cow. Then again, the next time we are thinking of adding one more cow, we'll again think like this. We'll think, okay, the benefit is more, so we'll add one more cow and so on. And eventually, what will happen is the grassland can only sustain a certain number of animals. After a point, what will happen is there won't be a lot of enough grass for us to feed all of our cows. So eventually, the cows will begin to die off, or basically, the cows will be underfed and they won't produce. Let's say initially they were producing 20 liters of milk every month. They'll start producing less, let's say 10 liters, 5 liters, and all of us will basically have to uh, carry this burden because all of us acted in our own self-interest and basically did not think about the common resource, but we only thought about our freedom of buying another cow, our benefit, and all of that. Okay. So this is basically what generally happens in real, because when we are basically as a farmer, as a fisherman, when we are trying to think about increasing our yield, we are basically most of the times the benefits that we get by increasing our yield are only uh, given to us, but the cost that is present because of our increase in the yield or increase in the crops and things like the increase in pesticide use and fertilizer use is basically a cost that is shared by everyone. And so this gives rise to a vicious cycle where we basically keep pushing the resource or the area, such as in this case, the grassland, to its limit. And after that, all of us suffer a very big negative consequence. Okay. Another thing is basically another thing that works in a similar way is something called the Ludwig's ratchet. So a ratchet